The gift was wrapped in ivory paper with a satin bow, which should have been my first clue. Renata never did anything without an angle. She slid it across the restaurant table during what was supposed to be my birthday dinner, her smile sitting just slightly too high on her face, like something pinned rather than felt. "Open it," she said, loud enough that Aunt Cecile looked up from her bread plate and our mother Dora went completely still. Inside the box, nestled in tissue paper, was a consumer DNA testing kit. Renata let the silence stretch before she spoke. "Maybe it'll finally explain why you turned out so different from the rest of us." She laughed at her own joke. I was the only one who didn't. I set the box beside my water glass, thanked her with a tone I'd spent 37 years perfecting, flat, unbothered, unreadable. Dora's fear told me more than Renata's cruelty did. Something was already in motion. I just didn't know yet what it was or how long it had been running without me. Let me back up. I grew up in a house in Raleigh that looked exactly like a family home from the outside. Large porch, dogwood in the front yard. Inside, it operated more like a hierarchy with soft furniture. My older sister Renata occupied the top of it by birthright and personality. She was louder, funnier, more demanding, and our mother, Dora, orbited her the way certain plants turn toward any available light. I was the quieter arrangement. The one who cleaned up without being asked, who got excellent grades and received polite acknowledgement, who learned young that being useful was the closest I'd get to being valued. By the time I left for graduate school, I understood implicitly that I was not the favorite. I made my peace with that and built a life around competence rather than approval. I settled in Philadelphia, worked in healthcare compliance, auditing hospital systems, untangling billing irregularities, documenting what institutions preferred to keep obscure. I was good at finding what people buried. It was, looking back, an ironic specialty for someone who hadn't yet found what her own family had buried about her. My father, Warren, died 18 months before that birthday dinner. He was a composed man, economical with words but not with attention, the kind of father who remembered what you said 3 conversations ago and brought it up gently when it mattered. His death left a specific shape of absence that I still sometimes walk into by accident. When he was alive, the tension between Renata and me had a ceiling. Warren wouldn't allow it past a certain point. After he was gone, there was no ceiling. The birthday dinner had been Dora's idea, but the staging had Renata's fingerprints on it. The restaurant was near the old house which Dora still lived in. The guest list was deliberately small, just family. Dora spent most of the meal not quite meeting my eyes. Renata spent it performing stories about her renovation project, a recent vacation, her opinion on everyone else's choices. She had always treated conversation like territory to claim rather than space to share. I noticed the gift early in the evening. She'd brought it in with her, kept it beside her chair where I could see it but not examine it. The presentation was theatrical. Everything about Renata was theatrical. But underneath the performance that night was something I hadn't seen before. A specific kind of anticipation. She wasn't just being unkind. She was waiting for a result. I mailed the kit the following morning, not because she had dared me to, but because her confidence unsettled me in a way. She had wanted me to take that test. She had wanted something to happen afterward. That was worth understanding. The results arrived on a quiet Wednesday 5 weeks later. I was between meetings standing in my kitchen in Philadelphia when the notification came through. I sat down before I opened it. No genetic relationship detected with the Caldwell maternal line. A strong suggested match to the Seraphin family. A name I had never heard. I read the results 3 times. Then I sat with them for 2 hours before I did anything else. The feeling wasn't devastation, exactly. It was more like watching a piece of furniture you always bumped into finally get moved. Painful in the immediate sense, but clarifying. I had spent 37 years half believing I imagined the distance in that house. The results told me I hadn't imagined anything. I didn't post it to a group chat. I forwarded the results to Dora directly, with a single sentence. "I think you already know what this says." She called within 4 minutes. Not to explain. To contain. Her voice was fragmented, Please don't share this, you don't understand the full picture. This happened so long ago, we were in a different place. She circled the facts without touching them. She never said, I should have told you. She never said, I'm sorry you found out this way. What she said over and over was please. Renata sent a text. 3 words. Now you know. I called her back that evening. She answered, sounding annoyed, as if I were interrupting something more important. I asked her directly why she'd done it, why the public humiliation, why the test, why now. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, with a calm that was worse than anger, because Dad knew I'd been managing things, and I needed you distracted. Because if you were busy questioning who you were, you wouldn't be asking questions about the estate. She paused. I've known for 15 years. I've held it over Mom for 15 years. I thought it was finally useful. She ended the call. I sat in my apartment listening to the particular silence that follows when someone has explained themselves completely and there is nothing left to say in response. I contacted an attorney the next week. Her name was Patricia Sohn, a quiet, methodical woman who specialized in contested estate matters and did not seem impressed by anyone. I brought her everything, the DNA results, a photograph I'd found in my father's files of a man I didn't recognize holding an infant that was clearly me, and a series of text messages between Renata and a paralegal at our family's estate firm that a cousin had forwarded to me without fully understanding what they meant. Patricia reviewed it all without expression. Then she said, your sister has been in contact with the estate attorney at least 6 times in the past 8 months. That's not grieving. That's maneuvering. The call from the estate attorney, Gerald Marsh, came 4 days later. His tone was formal in a way that estate attorneys rarely bother with, unless something significant is forcing them to be careful. He said my father had left specific instructions regarding the timing and conditions of the will reading, and that those conditions had now been met. He suggested I bring legal counsel. I brought Patricia. The morning of the reading was overcast, the kind of February sky that offers nothing. Marsh's office was in a downtown building with the sort of interior designed to communicate that whatever happens here is permanent. Dark wood. High ceilings. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, it's pressurized. Dora arrived looking like she hadn't slept in a week. She sat at the far end of the conference table and didn't acknowledge me when I entered. Renata came in after us, heels on marble, a tailored charcoal blazer, an attorney of her own, a man whose billboard I had passed on the highway. He handled estate litigation. Aggressively, apparently. Renata glanced at me when she sat down, and her expression said she had already calculated the outcome. Marsh read the will without preamble. Warren Caldwell left 65% of his estate, including the Raleigh property, investment accounts, and held assets to me. The room absorbed this for 1 full second before Renata stood up. She began speaking about the DNA results. She used the word illegitimate. Her attorney put a hand on her arm, which she shook off. Marsh waited, then continued reading. My father had known since I was 3 years old that I was not his biological child. He had chosen to remain my father. He had chosen to leave me his estate because, in his language, I had demonstrated throughout my life the values he most wanted to perpetuate. He stated this in 2 paragraphs that were the most direct thing I had ever heard him say. He had also, in the final year of his life, hired an investigator. The investigator had documented Renata's communications with 2 estate attorneys. The investigator had documented a series of financial transfers, just over $40,000, moved from a joint account, Warren shared with Dora, into an account under Renata's name during his final hospitalization. The investigator had documented the purchase of a DNA testing kit, shipped to Renata's home address, ordered 11 days before my birthday. Renata's attorney went very still. Marsh set down a handwritten letter from my father. He read it aloud. Warren had written directly to Renata, not cruelly, but without softness. He told her he had seen what she was doing. He told her he had hoped she would stop. He told her the consequences were constructed by her own choices, not by his. Renata's attorney leaned close to her and said something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, she didn't listen. She said the word fraud twice. Patricia stood and explained, in the same quiet register she used for everything, that the will contained a no-contest provision that would convert all outstanding financial transfers into personal debt owed to the estate in the event of a challenge. Approximately $240,000. Renata stopped talking. Dora, at the end of the table, had not said a single word. When I looked at her, she was looking at her hands. Renata's attorney withdrew from the case the following morning. Her contest was filed and dismissed within the week. The no-contest provision held. The $40,000 was reclassified as estate debt. She had a repayment timeline, and for the first time in her life, no one positioned above her to absorb the consequence. Dora came to see me a month later. She told me what she had never told me, the name of my biological father, the circumstances. She said she had always loved me. I believe she meant it. I also believe that love without honesty is a room with no door. You can describe it from the outside, but you can never actually enter. I told her I needed distance, not repair. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I managed the estate remotely, with Patricia's help. I did not move back to Raleigh. I found a smaller place outside Asheville, a quiet house with a long view, and no history I didn't choose for myself. I kept Warren's letter in the drawer of my desk, not as a wound and not as a trophy, just as proof that someone had seen clearly and recorded it honestly. Some families close around you like a hand. Others close around you like a fist, and you spend years mistaking the pressure for love. Have you ever inherited something you didn't know you were owed, not money, but clarity, and had to decide whether the cost of receiving it was worth what it cost everyone else?